Hi, it's Mrs. Ratcliffe here, and today we're going to be talking about algebra. We're just going to be introducing it as a concept and talking about what kind of maths it is, and basically I'm going to be trying to convince you that it's not scary. Algebra is one of those things that you hear it bandied about and you think, oh, I don't know, it sounds really tricky and scary, but I actually like it better than some aspects of maths because it's kind of got this aspect to it it's a bit of a puzzle, it's a bit of a riddle, and so I think it can be really fun. So algebra is the area of maths that we use rules to describe relationships between and patterns between numbers. Now that sounds kind of mysterious, but I'll show you an example in a minute. And just bear in mind that, like with anything that you're learning, whether it's football or netball or drama, that there's going to be terminology that you haven't seen before. So you just need to get your head around the language of algebra to be confident and familiar with it. So we'll look at some of the terms today. But I just want to start, Mrs. Ratcliffe, what do you mean by rules? So I'm just going to show you an example. This is an example. This is actually a question that was originally on one of the other Year 7's math tests. And then when we looked at it as teachers, we kind of went, actually, it's algebraic thinking. And the kids don't actually know how to use that yet. So I thought it was a really good example. Okay, so we've got this one angle, and we know that it's 16 degrees more than its complementary angle. Okay, that's the starters, that's the riddle. So what are the angles? What are they? Well, how do you work that out? The first one is you can say, I could write one angle, blah, 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 but it's awfully long, gets a bit messy, we don't have to write it over again. So we're going to use a value for it, a pronumeral for it, which I'll get into in a minute. We're just going to call that angle A. That's all. I mean, it's just the same thing, but that way we can use it in a sentence. Okay, so what do we know about that angle? We know that its complementary angle is 16 degrees less than it, right? So complementary means it adds up to 90 degrees. So we know that basically A plus itself minus 16 is 90. Does that make sense so far? That's what we know about the angle. We know they're not equal. It's not two angles that add up to 90, because that would be 45. We know that one of them is 16 degrees more than the other. So I've just written that into a sentence so that it's clear. That's what we know about it so far. But how can we work that out? Well, basically, let's simplify that. We've got two A's, haven't we? Minus 16 equals 90, basically. We've got this A over here and this A over there. We can just call it two A's. Okay? Now the thing is, I've got this daggy bit hanging out, this minus 16, and I just want to get rid of it. So the easiest thing to do is, since that's an equal sign, whatever I do on the left side, I have to do on the right. So if I added 16 to it, and I add 16 on this side, it'll even it out, won't it? Well, they're still equal, aren't they? They're still scales. They're still balanced, right? Okay, so when I add the 16 to the take 16, obviously that gets rid of it. So what I have there is 2A equals 106. This is 90 plus 16. I hope you're still with me. If not, don't panic, because I'm just showing you an example, and I don't expect you to know this. This is what we're going to learn. Okay, so we know that 2 A's equal 106. So what's 1A? Obviously, it's 106 divided by 2, right? So let's do that. 106 divided by 2. There's a 5, 53. Okay, so then we know that that angle is 53. So let's test it. Did that work? Did my maths work? Did I do it properly? Okay, so let's look. That would mean that we'd have one. A would be 53, and the other angle would need to be 16 degrees less than that. So that would make it 37. So let's just see if 37 and 53 add up to 90. They do. So we know that this first angle must be 53 degrees, and the other one must be 37. Okay? If you didn't get that, that's cool. I'm just showing you an example of how we use this rule to work it out. Now, otherwise, like without the algebra, without that trick or that set of steps that you can do to solve it. I don't know how else you could work it out. So it's just an example of using a rule to solve basically a mystery or a riddle. In this instance, it's about these two complementary angles, okay? All right, so for starters, we're going to be looking at some vocabulary that we use in algebra. The first thing is a word that I used before called pronumerals. Basically, in our example before, pronumeral would be our A. Our A. It's a letter or a symbol. You know, I could have used a triangle, or I could have used a little angle sign. I could have gone and made a little angle sign. I would still have been a pronumeral. A pronumeral is a letter or a symbol we use when we don't know what the number is yet. You know, when we're trying to figure out what the number is. Okay, an unknown is the actual value of the pronumeral. It's what it represents. So in our recent example, that the unknown was 53 for the pronumeral A. Okay. A rule. The rule is what describes a relationship between two or more values. So in our example, the rule was they're two complementary angles. One is 16 more than the other. Okay, that's our rule. And that's how we wrote it. And a variable is something that has a value that can change. So for example, if I said, you know, I know you guys don't really like that butterfly test, but in the butterfly test, for example, there's always going to be a relationship between the number of feelers, the number of wings, the number of bodies, for example. But that will change. It can change depending on how many butterflies you make. So you could use a variable to describe the relationship, and then depending on how many butterflies, that number will change. Okay? Basically, if you didn't understand that, that's okay, but basically a variable is something that can change. Its value can change. Okay, the last page of just using terminology for algebra. Sorry that this text is a little bit fainter. A constant. A constant is just a number by itself. In other words, 2. In our first example, 2 is the constant, would be the constant, or 16 would be the constant because it's by itself. Terms, one or more pronumerals. So in our example, if we had 2a and another a, or for example, that would be the terms. Coefficient is the number in front of a pronumeral. So the example I have here is if you had like 3m, the coefficient is that bit. Okay? An expression is what's made by combining terms. So for example, 3a plus 4b. That is an expression, whereas an equation would be 3a plus 4b equals 20. That's the difference. An equation contains an equal sign. Okay, so that was our very introduction to algebra. And hopefully it feels pretty comfortable, like an old pair of shoes, and you feel confident that you can go forward. And I hope that it's helped you understand. Good luck.